I'm Dimitris Perdikou. I'm the government chief engineer. I thought I'd just talk to you a little bit broader than serverless, but I'm going to touch on serverless today. It's great to be here. So first of all, we'll touch on what's my role. I know you probably mean, why do you care about what I'm doing up here? And I usually do a bit of a piece on all the different aspects of my role and different teams I've got. But in essence, I'm just trying to make engineering in government a really cool and exciting place to work. Whether it's the package or the roles, changing the roles, creating a progression path for engineers all the way up in government, whether it's getting all the right tools in place, that's what I'm passionate about. I don't want it to be seen as government's that place that just deals with all the old tech and the mainframe still. It should make it a cool place. That means using the cloud and using serverless and using AI. Well, trialing AI to see if it works or not. Creating the whole digital workplace, and lots of other aspects. So the first part I want to touch on is what's happening in the market. So it's probably the most confusing it's ever been. So this click's not working. There we go. So I thought I'd just pop up a couple of famous quotes that we've had over the years, from probably quite a few people. Hopefully you recognize up there, varying from what does good code look like? Is it code that a computer can understand? Is it code that a person can understand? And then, funny enough, a few years ago, Bill Gates coming out saying code will always be 100% human. I don't think that quite stands anymore. There's plenty of non-human generated code in our systems. And then Donald Knuth, if you don't know, is a famous researcher from Stanford, who's also won some of the Turing Prize a number of years ago, talking about what the best programs look like, what the computing machines, how to make them work quickly. Again, this is kind of all being turned on its head at the moment, looking completely different. Last thing I'll touch on is Satya Nadella talking about how we're going to use agents going forwards. So right now, we generally work in kind of fairly standard teams, collaborating with each other developers, kind of the business units. But what happens in the future when you've got 99 agents working with you? How do you collaborate them? Do you pair with the agents? I'd also just quickly touch on the market. Probably like many of you, I'm always looking to see what's happening in the wider market. Is there lots of jobs? Is there no jobs? And thought I'd compare the parallels and what's happening at the moment. So if you look at some of the big tech companies, your Salesforce, Microsoft, they seem to be getting rid of people, holding off hiring. And you look at those companies and you think, wow, is there a job there? How much more future is there for me as an engineer? Why is it so hard to find another job? But I think it really shows the bias of what you read in the news, because on the other side of this slide, you can see that LSE University are saying some of the most demanded jobs are in tech, machine learning, data science. Meta is offering 100 million signing bonus for the right AI researchers. Now, obviously, they're looking for quite specific people, and I'd love to have one of those jobs. I definitely don't earn that much in government, but they're doing lots of big jobs still going. The US job market. So out of the whole US job market, the biggest forecast growth is in digital and data roles. And in the global job market, it's the first time we're looking to hire more technologists in tech than any other sector out there. So we've kind of made that shift now where tech's now the biggest growing industry in the world. So it looks quite different. It's quite stark to what all the tech companies are doing. So given that and think about how confusing the market is, I thought I'd start with the people and end with the tech rather than start with the tech. So first of all, if you think about yourselves and across the room, who of you identifies as a developer? Put your hands up. Get a quick show of hands. Developers in the audience? Yep. And who identifies as an engineer? Who thinks it doesn't really matter which one you are? There we go. Much more common. No, I purposely put this up because if you actually have a look at the definition, or Googled it, and there's some slight nuance there. Developers really kind of focus on the code and delivering the bit of tech functionality that you're after. Engineers are looking at the bigger picture and the wider architecture and the system and what the business is trying to achieve. Now there's probably lots of people who are developers, but are also looking at the bigger picture. Why is this important? Because I think in the current way of the world, there's a lot more focusing on that engineering side. Doesn't mean we're never going to have developers and we don't need developers anymore. It's mean there's a much bigger focus on what your business needs. What problem are you trying to solve? How do I solve that problem as quickly as possible? And a bit of a shift away from people who can just spend their time, give me my next ticket, I'll code what the next thing you're after. And then following that, I think it's really important to understand how things are changing, and how people adapt to change. So I generally think about this as a spectrum, and kind of sit on the. Do you absolutely love change? Do you love it when a new tool comes out and you go and have a play with it and try and bring it into your process? Or are you someone who kind of likes that stability and wants to go and finish what you're doing in the way you're doing it all the time? I think, as with a lot of tech things, it depends, right? It depends on your environment. It depends on your mood on the day, on the project you're trying to work on, or the phase of the project you're working on. It's always going to depend. But I also think it's really important to understand that there's a spectrum there of people from one end to the other. Generally, I found when I've run exercises like this for teams, you generally find people want to be further right and embrace change more than they actually are. But we need people on both ends of that spectrum. We need people who are willing to go and try the latest thing, whether it was serverless when that was first coming out. It was really important for some people to try it. Equally, some people to hold back a little bit and think, you know what, we're about to launch this big new thing and we've already got all our containers running. Maybe we try this in next year as the next big thing. You have to find that right balance within your team. I've also found, as a leader, not only understanding yourself, but understanding your team. You really need to understand who in your team is jumping after that chain and who's not, and how you have the conversations with those that are running after those latest tools, and kind of hone them in a little bit when they need to, but really get excited when they're able to. And on the other side of the spectrum, you're going to have those people at the moment going, I can't keep up with anything. You keep throwing all these new tools at us. You need to get them excited about some of the new tools and how it could change their way of working and help stabilize things even more. Sorry, it keeps not clicking. The next thing is thinking about how we're training people up going forwards. And that's everyone from new people entering the market, people reskilling themselves, to professional hires or those trying to change what their specialty are. And I've put up a few of the areas that I'm really thinking about at the moment. So the first thing is thinking about assessing your current skills. When was the last time you kind of sat down and just thought about, what am I really good at? Is it deploying serverless functions? Is it DevOps pipelines? Is it using Amazon or Microsoft or Google? Is it your soft skills in trying to articulate to the business what all this tech stuff means when they haven't got a clue what you're saying? Is it dealing with a global DNS outage? But take some time to understand those skills and take some time to think about what the next set of skills that you're trying to grow, particularly in the current market. The next thing is thinking about what that learning pathway is. I've seen quite a few, both private sector and then in the public sector. We've got quite a prescriptive learning pathway. I'd highly recommend a book if you ever get a chance called Squiggly Careers. So this amazing book is kind of done research and proven that toying around with different roles over your lifetime makes you much happier and much more successful. Even if you just do it within the digital and data profession. If you're a dev, go and do a stint for 6 months as a product manager. See what it's like to do that different role. Have an appreciation for it. Go and sit in the business units for a couple of weeks and try out what they're doing. It'll completely change your perspective on things. But even within engineering roles, how many people do you know that have branched out from a data science role into a software developer role, into a DevOps role? It's actually very few. So I've now started to work on some programs on how we help enable people reskill within engineering roles across government. It's really important to have those different specialties, but once you become a senior and a lead, I've often found people trying to start pigeonholing them. That's what I do now. This is what I know about, rather than thinking, I'll go and do something, maybe I'll go and do data science role for a little bit. So we're looking at short-term courses, maybe kind of 6 or 8 weeks, and either full-time or part-time through that period, can kind of jumpstart you, so you can jump into go from a lead DevOps role to a lead data scientist role. The next thing I think is really important, I've really come to appreciate this the more I've kind of progressed my career, both as a mentor and a mentee, is having those mentorships and coaching relationships. It's given me a lot of appreciation for other people's and their challenges they face. I've mentored quite a lot of women in tech in the last few years, and what I found is actually that all the women I've mentored have been much better at software development than I have been, and I've happily said that to them, and I actually think they should be going well above and beyond the grade that they were currently at. But they were struggling with confidence, so I just gave them that little push and to apply. And I've had quite a few people now. I've grown into the next role, but it opened my eyes up. I'm not a woman. I don't understand what it's like to be in a women tech now. I've got some appreciation for it, but by doing that mentorship, I've now really started to appreciate and get their view of the challenge they've had and fighting for how I can help get them progress in their own careers. So I'd highly recommend you think about always having a mentorship program. Both you get a mentor and ask someone whenever you work with somebody else from another organization, or if you meet someone here today that you think is quite interesting, go mentor them. I'm sure they'll appreciate it as well, getting more ideas and thinking from other parts of industry. The other thing is measuring and iterating in the skill space. I'm sure most of you within your own teams think about measuring your throughput. The DORA metrics are quite commonly used, and hopefully a lot of you think about some of the DORA metrics in your day-to-day engineering work. But when do you think about doing that in your skills work? Do you measure what level your skills are, as I mentioned before? Do you iterate on different ways? When you're hiring new people, have you had training in how to interview people? Do you think about what worked last year for interview and try and improve it? For some reason, we forget all these good practices, even though we know them really well in engineering and some of our wider working. So next time you do an interview, maybe think about a year later, what worked in that interview? Was that person as good as you expected? The next thing to touch on, I've really seen a shift in the last few years from people coming into the industry, rather than coming through degree schemes, coming through apprenticeship schemes. I think it's really exciting. Although I love going to university, I'm not sure I got 3 years worth of technical learning out of it. Plenty of other learning, but not 3 years worth of technical learning out of it. So I've been excited to see a lot of these apprenticeships come through. But I think we're at kind of a pivotal point where do you even need to do that anymore? When I started learning the first few languages, I started my career learning a bit of C++ and Java. It was always doing Hello World. I'm sure all of you in this room have probably done a Hello World something a long time ago. I don't think that really applies anymore. You can understand some basics, go into an AI tool and say, build me this website, this application, this API, and give me a whole bunch of code. And then you can just work through what is done. So how do we start teaching people? We have to rethink away from the go and write the hello world, see it run, then go and do something basic, maybe a basic calculator or something like that. Now we've got a chance to reshape that way that learning is happening. I think a lot of us are already doing that, but we haven't worked out what that progression and learning path might look like. The last part on here is about partnering with other organizations. And it's so excited to see so many people here from across different parts of different industries. I believe there's lots of public sector people here today. There's lots of private sector people. I saw some people from some finance institutions, some marketing institutions. Partnering is really important in this day and age. And we have to work out how we work as organizations with other companies. How we work with the tech companies is more important than ever. We should be shaping their roadmap through their product managers rather than just leveraging whatever the new announcement and new tech comes out. But I also think this has become a global effort. So sometimes you don't even think about this. But if you go onto Stack Overflow, it doesn't really matter if someone was based in the UK or Australia or America. We're now working across a global community. And more than ever, I've seen governments collaborating or engineers collaborating around the world, and they don't mind where it is anymore. So suddenly we've got a global collaboration forum rather than just a local, whether it's just Cardiff. It's still massively important to run events like this today, to go and meet other people, but equally think about how we're working together as a global community. And the other thing I've started to experiment with, and this is very much an experimental phase, is thinking about what a team structure looks like. How many of you would you say, work in a standard agile team? Pop your hand up. Yeah. Maybe somewhere in the 7 to 10 people, maybe a product manager and half a dozen engineers. Is that what the team should look like going forward? So we've had that structure now for the best part of 3 decades. And now I think it's the time to rethink that. We've been working on these pod type concepts and maybe having user researchers and designers in those teams. But some of the latest teams, why not rethink it completely? Why not have a couple of people that are professional engineers, really good at coding, with some people with good at using some of the low code tools or some of the vibe coding tools, with some of the user researchers? Or if you can ship out loads more code now and deliver really fast, then why try and form a team of 8? Form a team of 2 for a couple of weeks and see how it works. See if you're happy. We seem to have that we're kind of stuck in this process now of we should have an agile team of 7 to 10 people. I think I agree not having bigger teams than that. Otherwise, the whole way of collaborating, a way of working becomes really hard. Amazon have famously got the 2 pizza teams there, and you think more than what 2 pizzas can feed you. Well, I think we've been quite scared of having less teams, and we've always got to grow to that certain space. So think about if you could run teams with 2 or 3 people instead. So, on to the exciting part, probably what you actually hear is for the technology, but I'm going to take a brief history through some of the technology as well. So, as many of you know, if you're in the room, we were working all that infrastructure through on-premise data centers for a long time and building out the data centers. And every time you want to change something, you have to build some more racks or some more data centers. Then we moved on to containers. And many places out there still running lots and lots of containers, made it easier to deploy consistently, effectively, do stuff locally. Really exciting. Then, of course, we moved on to serverless, and this forum started, was it 5 years ago? So much, much easier to deploy that infrastructure. But where do we take it next? Why do we even need the serverless functions? Why do we care about the serverless functions? And in the day, as I said earlier, as engineers, we're trying to solve those problems and solve them as easily as possible. So why care about the infrastructure at all? And we think this is new. Serverless has been out 5 or 10 years, and there's lots of Gen AI stuff in the news. I recently had managed to go to the Computer and History Museum in California, and just a heads up, about half of the history there came from the UK, not from the States, which is quite happy to see, even though the museum is in America. But I saw a demo of a Gen AI tool from the 60s. And I was shocked. I didn't realize they had this kind of thing. But they were using Gen AI type concepts in the 1960s to create new movie scripts. Probably explains somewhat why Hollywood as it is today and Netflix keep reusing similar programs. But actually, there's lots that you can learn from previous scripts about what works and new things. So sometimes it's worth taking a break when you're in what's the latest thing? I can't keep up. There's so much new tech coming out and thinking some of it isn't that new. What's this? Can I click? There we go. And then I thought I'd talk a little bit more about the development process as well. So how do we develop the actual code? So if we can move on from serverless and make it as easy as possible, what's the next step in how we actually develop those systems? And again, taking you back for a little bit of history, we had lots of capacitors and switches, quickly grew to hundreds of capacitors, couldn't do that anymore. We were writing more and more code, but then that complexity started to get taken away as we started using compilers. Now, it's a little bit before my time. I've talked to plenty of people in the industry that I've worked with how this worked, and I think we've got a similar movement now where everyone was scared. How can you have a compiler? Like, I need to know how the code is going to work and how it's going to run on the machine that I'm running on it. Why would I trust this compiler? And it feels like the same conversation now. Yes, there's different risks and different problems, but everyone's saying, how can I trust this AI tool? It isn't me saying blindly go and trust it, but I can see us going through a movement going forwards where we build more trust into it and we start developing. And it's okay to be one step removed. Doesn't mean, as I said, doesn't mean go and do that right now, but try using those tools and we're going to have a massive shift away from how we develop our code. And then as we grew past using the compilers, I think it's worth thinking about how many people understand that. So put your hand up in the room if you know what a compiler does. Leave your hand up if you think you actually understand how it works, or you've looked at the compiling code, or if it went away tomorrow, you think you could recreate a compiler. Yeah, a lot of hands going down there. There's a couple there, so I might come and find you later because I don't know. I haven't got a clue how it works, and I don't think for a second that if it went down tomorrow, I'd have any idea how to compile my code. I've just stopped thinking about it. Doesn't mean there's no longer a need for it. There's less people having to think about it, and we have to rely on a small part of the market to be able to develop these things. It's still really important, but why do the rest of us don't really care? We just need it to be there to make it work. And as we've moved on further, we've had ideas for a while, but they've really started to progress a lot over the last few decades. There's quite a few, maybe they converged quite a bit in the market, but actually they were building in some of these newer concepts or predicting what you want. They were building in kind of predictions on what the rest of your word was going to say, or the rest of your class or function was going to say. They've been building in making sure the right number of spaces there, so your code finishes and compiles correctly. For some reason, at the time, I seem to remember a lot of people saying, "This works great. It just fixes my thing really easily." But now with some of the latest AI tools, like, but why do I trust the AI to generate it? It's going to be wrong. But we were fine with it when we were just completing the end of the line. We've progressed over the last few years. So we're about 2 years on from when the core kind of AI coding assistant started coming out, generating code for you. I've had really good fun exploring the use of these, which I'll touch on in a minute. But it feels like we've kind of jumped over that era now into agentic as well. So what agents are you going to deploy? How can you have an agent go and do something for you? What other data can it wrap in? First of all, I'd say I'm not going to tell you what agentic era is because I haven't got a clue. When I talk to tech companies and they're always advertising to me, come and use our latest agentic AI stuff, the first question I ask them is, what is agentic AI? And every single one of them give me a very different definition. I'd urge some of you to do the same. Just ask them to define it, because there isn't a definition for that at the moment. It's just as bad as sovereign infrastructure as well, where there's a different definition for that every week. But we're quickly deploying them. Some organizations are now deploying thousands of them, and they're really useful. You can go and deploy them really quickly. You can get rid of them really quickly. They're also creating the next phase of legacy as well, though. So bear that in mind if you're going to go and play with them. So I've been trying to think about where all this lands in terms of how we're working and how we're using the latest tools. And I've kind of come up with this spectrum. Once again, it's a spectrum and it depends, and you're going to be somewhere on the spectrum. But on one end of this curve, I think, how have we been developing and engineering applications? We've been doing it for a while, the same way of working, largely handwriting most of our code. On the other end of the spectrum is your vibe coding end of the spectrum. So just use natural language, put it into it, put it in what your problem is into the tool, let it generate all the stuff. Now, if we could trust all that, I'd say give up being an engineer. There's no point. We're going to have a few thousand around the world and who are going to develop the tools, and that's it. But the reality is that we're miles from there yet. I do see a future where this will be the case and we'll probably need less engineers overall. But from what I can see, this is probably decades off, even with the new capabilities and new things happening. Does that mean we shouldn't use them? No, of course not. They have their time and place. If I'm doing a personal project, I'd happily vibe code something, put it in, see if it works. If it works, great. I vibe code with my 7-year-old now to try and get to see what he can create. And he comes up with all sorts of weird and wonderful examples of what he could create that I never would have thought of creating. In reality, when you're working with other systems, you're probably going to be somewhere along this spectrum, playing with agents, playing with AI code, getting something to generate a new feature and a new test for you, but testing it properly through that software delivery process. So just have a think when you're developing something new, how that might work. One of the best use cases I'd thought is much earlier in my career, I worked on a lot of websites, and developing those websites, we used to have this really arduous wireframe process. We had someone who was good at working with the business, understanding what they want, who'd spend a week or two understanding what new features they want on the website. They create this big picture of what the business thinks the next page or the next release should look like. They come to us after a couple of weeks and show us this picture. We'd find a couple of reasons that's not possible, send it back again. They'd bring it back. We'd develop the new features. in a test environment, and then the business would then review them and say, move this box over here or something's wrong over there. Now you can vibe code that. There's nothing wrong with vibe coding that with the business on the fly and then showing them the website and what it might look like. But doesn't mean that code is going to make it to production. It means that you've gone through that cycle with a really easy process to actually show them something meaningful and something that actually looks like a website rather than a picture. You can then pass that on to the development team going, this is exactly what we're after. They've tried it out. They've looked through. They're happy with it. Now go and make it work properly in a productionized level of code. And that's fine. I think that's a really good example of where to use it. It doesn't mean you're going to go to the most critical business functionality and go and vibe code everything. But going and playing and trialing these things is what's really important. Click, click. There we go. So the last thing, last area I want to talk about before I leave is about how it's impacting other roles. I think engineers, and we've been first on this AI journey after the LLMs on how it's been disrupting our field. So we had the LLMs and everyone was asking ChatGPT on how to do things, and that's entered the wider market. The next big disruption was to engineers. So engineers have got AI coding assistants now. They're being asked to summarize things and add new features all the time. The next big area, which has already started to be disrupted, is architecture. So architects to now ask a tool, what would be the best tools for this job? And I'd urge everyone, again, go and experiment, try this out. Next time you've got a big new project coming in at work or it's a whole bunch of new functionality, give one of the tools, here's all my requirements for my business, here's my current infrastructure, and I use more of this cloud platform. Tell me what you think would be the best solution for it and see what it comes out. I've actually been really impressed with some of the options. I was just talking with some of the other speakers about trying to keep up with some of the latest releases from some of the big tech companies, and I have no chance. I used to be heavily working on Amazon. I used to try and keep up to date with everything. I can't even keep up with everything being released on Amazon now, so I don't even know all the options that are out there, never mind all the other tech providers. So try asking the tool, here's my requirements, this is what it might be. I think we're going to get much faster on defining requirements. I've worked on some big projects where you spend months and months trying to understand what the business want and write requirement docs. You can now really speed up that process using some of the standard LLM practices. But the other big part is things about how you produce those designs. So many times architects work in isolation on producing that design to then hand it to an engineer, and what actually gets built doesn't actually reflect that. Now they can produce an API spec in minutes that is probably pretty close, and they can update that API spec. Or you can produce another microservice that adheres to that API spec all the time. At the same time, engineers' roles are still changing quite a lot as well. We've suddenly got people building models that we never had before. We're building ML pipelines. We're specializing in specific AI tools. So that the engineer role is changing quite a lot as well. But equally, we're now blurring the lines between engineering and architecture. So when we were working before, engineers would rely on an architect to try and give them a direction or choose the next solution. If they can just ask the tool, what's the best solution for this, that completely changes it. Rather than waiting for architects to work together and produce a design doc and an API spec, they can just get the tool to produce it themselves. So now that's all been blurred. So if you're anybody in the room an architect, worked in an architect role, the AI is coming for you next. It's been disrupting all the engineers. It's coming for you next. It's going to disrupt that role. And I think over the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to see a massive change in what people are looking for architects. But it's just going to carry on to other roles. And we need to be trying these tools so we can adapt it. So have we got any product managers in the room? No. Well, go back and let your product managers know that it's coming for them as well. I've already seen this happen quite a lot in some of those mature organizations. The product managers have completely disrupted their way of working. Rather than asking the engineers and architects, where's the best new feature put in? What are the users doing the most, or what are they being disrupted by the most? Well, if you're pulling in all that context, maybe through an MCP server into your on your data, into your models, the product manager can now ask the tool itself, what are my users doing? Where would I get the most performance improvement? Or I have this new feature I want to do. How much more would it cost me? That's now all possible. They can ask all those things and have a much more educated answer rather than sitting in weeks of planning or with their teams try and understand those tools. So it's disrupting their roles as well, and that's just within the digital and data community. So the last bit I want to leave you with is how do we get the builders of the future? So how do we get people building more stuff in government? The Prime Minister has announced that he wants to shift the civil service workforce from 5% digital and data professionals to 10%. It's probably not much compared to some of the big tech companies, but it's a big shift. For the first time, government will have roughly the same number of people working digital data than they have in policy. In the past, policy has always been the biggest profession in government, and that's now going to change. Why is that important? Because actually, why should it be 10%? Why shouldn't it be 100%? I'm not saying we should have everyone building critical systems like how you cross the border or pay your tax, but you can get them more involved in how that works. And they can be part of those reshaped and reframed teams. So we're really exploring the moment, and we're kind of toying this idea of builders, where you take people coming from the business, who maybe AI is going to have a massive impact with. Maybe they work in a contact center, and suddenly a contact center, given some of the latest capabilities, doesn't need all those people. You go and put them on a course. Maybe it's a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks. And funny enough, we're just running Get Tech Certified in government, where we've partnered with those tech companies to give us loads of free training, and we're starting to train up some of those business people in some tech capabilities, like go and play around with Amazon Q or GitHub. Copilot Studio, just go and build something. We're kind of leveraging that knowledge for them to try and build something themselves and really embrace some of the digital and data capabilities. And we've got potential here to reshape that wider workforce. And we're talking about, just in government, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, never mind everybody else. So I'm going to leave you the thought of take all those people in your wider business and think about how you'd want to work with them. What skills would you want them to have to bring that knowledge? How would you want to sit them in your in that agile team with 8 to 10 people? Could they recreate those wireframes that we used to create, but do it sat next to you whilst you collaborate with them, rather than waiting for that endless loop back and forwards? Was there something else, another way of working I haven't thought of here? But so that's what I'm up to. I know it wasn't all serverless, but I think it all plays together and how we develop those new functions and solve those business problems in the future. And it's all being reshaped at the moment. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening.